The quality control sticker is not a routine attachment, it is hard won. A manufactured item is inspected and tested to ensure that it performs its intended function. As anyone who has put together a motorcycle will know, no matter how careful you are, its sheer complexity makes malfunction of some aspect much more than an academic possibility. That's why motorcycle factories employed test riders. This is an early trade plate from Felon and Moore. Panther enthusiast Doug Stockley describes how the road tester slipped arms through the inner tube loops to display the plate on his back at the start of his shift and keep himself legal on whichever machine he had to throw a leg over. The Four Counties POC meeting is over, and outside the pub Steve, Neil and I have agreed to swap motorcycles for the first stage of our homeward ride. Neil will test my modified Model 35 ES, the subject of this video. Steve has started his pre-war Red Panther for me, and he will ride back on the Model 35 which Neil arrived on. That's also Steve's, but let's not confuse things. My mid-60s Model 35, the Pride and Clark sold 250 twin, was bought as a project back in the 1980s, tired and ready for resuscitation. Right from the start I had plans for it beyond a return to original condition, because I considered the electric start lightweight something of a missed opportunity for P&M. With its peppy off-the-shelf two-stroke twin motor and Italian design-inspired tank and lightweight frame, it could have been a more attractive buy for the learner lad that I then was, and admittedly sometimes imagine that I still am. For my version, I envisaged rear set footrests and dropped ace handlebars, with a humpy-backed single seat. Something a little more effective than the 6-inch British hub, one leading, one trailing shoe front brake, would also be an advantage on such a lively bike. The Villiers twins have a bolted-up gearbox, and the rear of the engine casting is fitted with a gasket and doubles as the front of the box. I discovered that by unbolting it. As there is no provision for primary chain adjustment, when it starts to eat the case you buy a new chain, I adapted an idea for this nylon block slipper tensioner, its backplate bolted to extra length studs. There was the expected major engine work, the crank bearings and seals at end of life. I won't bore you by describing the process, except to say that renewal is not a job for the faint-hearted. On the plus side, I was fortunate to pick up a set of little worn barrels and pistons. The process began with a dry build, adding an auto-jumble find Yamaha twin leading shoe front hub and modified brackets for rear set footrests. A new brake pedal and a reversed gear lever would suit these new positions. Off-the-shelf drop handlebars complete the sporty setup. Time to dismantle, apply paint and reassemble the hubs built into new 18-inch rims. Thread lock is a friend here. We don't want to risk leaving a trail of components down the highway. Steel guards are protected inside with car body underseal, the tin dunked in warm water to soften it. This is a winter build. In summer, I hand over my workshop to the spiders. A new wiring loom was created on a board, screws driven in to represent positions of major components. Ends are labelled with masking tape, adding a couple of spares from headlight to saddle nose before wrapping and securing ends with heat shrink tubing. The components are connected and tested as we go, and I make a note of wire colours on a copy diagram. For some reason, fuses were considered a luxury in the 1960s. Having seen the smoke, I saw the light, and I fit a fuse. A bespoke seat doesn't benefit from an off-the-shelf cover, so I negotiate for some sewing room time and create one cushion foam cut with a car boot sale electric carving knife. Press studs give access to the hump and its tool roll, leaving one side panel for the electric starter's battery and one for a bottle of two-stroke oil. A bench start suggests no major problems, so we're ready for the road. Imaginary trade plate on back. All seems well as we drop the clutch. But 200 yards out, never mind the earplugs, we're running back for the spanners. The bushes are good, and I refilled the gearbox with 30-weight oil, but there's clearly something very wrong with the intermediate gear pairs. On inspection they don't look half as worn as those which I'm trying next, but the improvement is dramatic. This is the start of our run to that Panther meeting. Two strokes may be an acquired taste, but any sweet running bike which fits you and meets your performance expectations is pure pleasure. This one was set up to suit me, footrest and controls tacked, tried, ground off and tacked again. A 60-mile run for lunch with friends brings few discomforts to spoil the delight. The tank is small at a claimed 2.5 gallons. Did they include the section above the filler? And with fuel being converted to energy and heat at almost a gallon every 50 miles, we'll need a top-up to complete our 120-mile ride. Villiers recommended 16:1 petrol mix, but oil technology has moved on in 60 years, and the 2T is happy and considerably less smoky with synthetic at half that concentration. My right boot, more familiar with the slightly agricultural, not to say pedestrian, heavyweight Berman gearbox, takes the Villiers 4-speed as a holiday. There is barely any need to pause on declutching, and the effort required to change is minimal. The Model 35's lightweight poise is such that I can practically think it round corners. Yes, occasionally I get lazy with the gears, forgetting that this baby doesn't share the traditional Panther grunt. But in no time at all we're zinging into Henham village and pulling up outside the pub, where I spot Dick at an outside table to confirm that I have the right day. Which brings us back to our premise, test riding for quality control. As I attempt to select first gear on the pre-war Red Panther, Steve takes off in a whiff of two-stroke smoke. Occasionally people make excuses for ill-behaved motorcycles on the basis of their age, but by the vintage era, manufacturers had got things pretty well sorted, and P&M's perfected motorcycle was more than just a slogan. Steve's Red Panther is a good example of an almost complete build, probably just needing minor work to make it run as well as it did in the 1930s. Nigel, BSA mounted, heads out as Charlie pulls alongside on his heavyweight. Dick strolls over and Neil comes back on my ES to offer advice regarding a restart.
Sort of thing. Okay, cheers Charlie.
You tickled it.
No,
Did
does
he
it?
turn the petrol on? He likes a bit of a tickle.
Right, even if it's hot, this
Yeah, well,
fuel's on, is it? Yeah, it's on. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I can't show you the rest of my Red Panther test ride because at that moment the camera battery went flat. Perhaps it's for the best that when I eventually made it back to Steve's, my comments were not recorded.